Redditors who one day just said, "Foo it," and quit their job to travel the world. How did it all work out? Worked out really well. Hardest part was convincing my wife that it wasn't as high risk as she thought it would be. I had no idea of the risk involved, tbh. Took a year out to travel overseas, came in well under budget, thanks to my so's frugality, and got the offer of a new job 3 months before heading back. I'm in that job now and I'm already planning on doing it again. Got early approval from my wife this time too. I did what you are talking about at 21. I had a low paying but enjoyable job but was feeling a little unfulfilled. I'd been working hard for very little money since I was 16 and had little to show for it. I went online and paid for a New Zealand working holiday visa. It was granted and I had up to a year to save up enough money to make the trip viable. Went to NZ about 7 months later, worked my way around, got drunk a bit, made friends, saw things, met a girl. She followed me back to the UK and we decided to put all our energy into her skill, which is writing. 6 years later we have a successful writing travel business and have traveled over 50 countries. I'm lucky, but I was also a little brave and worked hard. I'd rather have failed trying to do something I wanted to do than had success at something that did not fulfill me. I was young. I was bored at work and didn't want to go back to university. I saw an ad in the paper saying come to Germany and be an au pair. I thought it would be a year. I'd learn another language, see a bit more of Europe and have a chance to think about what to do next. That was 23 years ago and I still live in Europe. I just announced to my employer this last week that I'll be quitting this summer. My wife and I are getting rid of most of our stuff, selling our house, and we'll be traveling for a year across the US and Canada with our 2 kids in a vintage travel trailer we've refurbished. I'll report back in a year. I'll be waiting. D. I didn't quit my job. I just took 3 months off and drove from Key West to Prudhoe Bay AK on the Arctic Ocean and back one summer. I saw 2 friends along the way for a night but otherwise was alone for the summer, mostly camping or sleeping in my car. It was the best summer of my life and gave me the reset I was looking for to go back to all the things I was doing in my life. It's been 6.5 years since I did it and everything on my life has been better. I'm dealing with more stressful things now and handling it much better. If you like to drive, I highly recommend making the trip. Out west you can go for days only talking to people at gas stations. You can do 133 on the Bonneville Salt Flats and pay $750 to get towed off of them when you hit a wet spot. You can see the Milky Way next to White Sands. You can put your feet in the Arctic Ocean, stand down in Arctic Wolf. Watch the reaction on the mechanic's face in Seattle when you get an oil change twice in 2 weeks and watch as he realizes that it's not even his sticker on your windshield the second time. You can change 2 flats at once. Have a kitchen crew give you a standing ovation when they hear you drove from Florida to have their salmon. You can see the things you wanted to but never had the chance and the things you never knew you wanted to because when you see something you can just go. You can camp at 12,000 feet by a lake. Spend a day on top of a 14k mountain. You can play in the snow in April and in the sun at midnight. Take 3 months off. Get in the car and drive. Do a bit of planning. Mostly get your car in shape. Buy extra full-sized spares and if you feel it's necessary buy. Train with aunt, learn how to get a firearm into Canada. I needed it though, didn't actually fire. I had a good job and was just bored. The wife and I were just doing the same crap over and over in town. Movies, dining out, going to the lake, bonfires. It was a good life. Just boring after a while. I decided I wanted to get out and go see Europe. We started saving money and 2 years later we went. It was amazing. I had 18 days off work and felt like I was living my dream. We went back home and 10 months later, I wanted to move to Europe. So here I am typing at work, from Europe, and we've been here 3 years so far. Best experience of my life. Follow your dreams. Not me, but a relatively close friend of mine. She was involved in a pretty bad car accident and had a life-changing epiphany. She realized that life is too short and she should just quit her Fortune 100 accounting job and travel the world. So she did. She left a very high-paying job with zero notice and flew to Europe and spent just over a year there. Says it was the best time of her life. However, when she came back she had a dose of reality. She ghosted pretty much everyone she knew, so she had trouble finding places to live. She also spent over 6 months looking for a job because no accounting firm would hire her, since she either had a huge time gap on her resume or would have to explain why she just left her high-paying job. She ended up settling for some mid $40,000 a year job, which was a huge pay cut compared to her original job of around $100K. Says sometimes she regrets it because she feels her career has been fricked, but also says she wouldn't trade the experience she had for anything. Just depends on the days and when bills are due. Had a great job right out of college. I just hated it. I made a ton of money, but I was so bored and literally counting the seconds until 5 PM so I could leave. I was in a city that I just didn't agree with. Made the gut decision to quit one day. I didn't travel the world, but I took a month off of life and really just figured out what I wanted. Ended up driving across the country, starting a new career, and have spent almost 2 years to the day happier than anything. I make a lot less, work a ton more, but I'm glad I took the risk because dang is it worth it. Wrecked my car the day I was going to leave, ended up living jobless and carless in my mom's extra bedroom for 6 months. Are you planning to do this? I feel like you're wanting someone to tell you do it, which, if that's the case, then I'll be that person. Either do it right now, or set a hard date to do it in the near future to get the logistics sorted. But either way, do it. If it's not the case, then ignore this post. Right now I don't want to do this, but the idea was always appealing to me, so I wanted to know how it worked out for others. I decided to uproot my whole life and move to Puerto Rico with a friend. We've been here a little over a month and I want to go back. I am going back in a few weeks for sure, hopefully sooner. It feels unsafe pretty much everywhere. I don't speak Spanish fluently, so there is almost always problems with communication. Majority of houses don't have a sea, nor does mine, so it's always hot and humid. The internet has 2 speeds, slow and not working. Beautiful ocean views can only make up for so much. I'm tired of it all. 99% of the posts are of the I've never looked back type stories. Best of luck getting back. Had the most mind-numbing, boring job at the worst call center. One good thing was that money piled up since I had no life due to 3-hour-day commuting. I said frick this and decided to overhaul my life. Lose weight and travel the world to cure my introvertism. It wasn't all bad, but I can tell you that to travel the world alone as an introvert was probably the worst idea ever. Being too shy to make contact with people. Staying at my hostel because night outside in strange countries are scary and so on doesn't really expand your horizons. Then I went to USA and got stuck in a small backwater town in Wisconsin for a few months with winter flirt before heading home. Went back to Sweden. Flopped about a bit and then went back to my old job for another few years before finding something better. All in all, it was well worth it, but I think I would have a much better time with a friend for the trip to do things with and who would push me to do stuff. Pretty good. Now live on the other side of the world with wife and 2 kids, doing a job that doesn't exist in any meaningful way in my home country. What you may not realize is that doing exactly this, going traveling for at least 6 months, more often a year or more, is pretty dang common for young adults in almost every Western country in the world except for the US. But those college debts keep you guys chained to the floor. I never made the debt connection to travel in the US until now. That sucks. Did this in 2009 at the age of 27. Quit my job as a senior programmer at a major US bank to visit Australia for a month. Immediately met a girl that liked adventure, so we decided to live and travel together. We dated for 5 years and lived in 15 countries. Half were Asian countries because they're cheap and close to us. The constant travel and separation from our friends and family took a toll and eventually we both wanted something different. That was almost 3 years ago. Still love travel. Total number of countries I visited currently stands at 26. Currently living in Laos with a pretty easy and carefree life. No stress at all. Bliss. I graduated in 2012 at the tail end of the recession UK and immediately left for New Zealand. It didn't work out. I made all the classic mistakes. Returning home, the job market was absolutely horrific and all I could get was 14 hours a week at the university I graduated from. I then got an interview at a very large media agency and then a second interview. I finally thought this is it, only to fall at the last hurdle. I had enough money for a plane ticket and a bit to live on. I said frick it, threw some clothes in a bag and moved to Toronto. Immediately got a well-paid government job and met my Australian girlfriend not long after getting there. I learned French, went to Paris, went to San Francisco, Burning Man, Montreal, Paris again, Montreal again, Hawaii, New Caledonia, and I now live in Sydney with the Australian girl I've told you about. We've been together over 3 years now. Tomorrow I have an interview at the Department of Education. 14 hours a week, single, with limited possibilities and barely enough spare cash to scratch 2 pennies together. To today, I'd say it went fricking spectacularly. I know a guy who said frick it and took out a large loan and backpacked across Europe after high school. He now, 30, works entry-level factory jobs, nothing wrong with that, and lives paycheck to paycheck with his son. He lives a stressful life, but regrets nothing. I quit my job, got rid of all my stuff, and set out to travel the world. My goal was to circumnavigate over the next year, but I only made it 3 months. Turns out if you're running away from life due to depression, you won't get very far. I think my travels might have been better had I started in South America or Europe. Due to less of a cultural and language barrier, I started in Korea. Even though it was only 3 months, I definitely grew as a person. I'd recommend it to everyone, even those with depression. Just have realistic goals, and don't be afraid to fail. A little over a year ago, my wife and I decided to pack it all in a backpack, quit our jobs for a year and travel. We made it 51 weeks and 28 countries before returning to work. Before we left, we were comfortable in our lives, working 40 hours a week and not really having the time to enjoy one another. We had stuff, money, but no experience. After coming home, we downsized from our previous lives and hope to continue down a path of being fairly minimalistic. Congrats, sounds like it was really worth it. Hope you succeed with your lifestyle. Told my boss I want to see the world, was sent to Asia for some months. Back for a few months now, permanently moving to Hong Kong in July. I had a crappy job working in a tax office. It was inhumane. My American girlfriend at the time was about to finish her summer program in England. After her studies, she had planned to backpack around Europe with her friend. We were both naive. We can Skype about our prospects, but we both feared it wouldn't work, that the distance would kill it. As a final huzzah, I decided to plan a long weekend away in one of her stops. So I booked a Friday off of work and I flew out on a Thursday evening to Berlin to spend a final weekend with her. Me, my girl and her friend then spent an awesome 3 days in Berlin, drinking, and drinking. We had some German friends there also, equally charming and charismatic. Monday came and my flight was scheduled in the afternoon. I packed up my things and proceeded to walk to the lobby of the hostel. We were all gathered there, chit-chatting. Internally I was dying. I thought to myself, here is this girl who likes you, who actually likes you, and you're about to fly home to some godforsaken town to go back to some godforsaken job that you hate. Then, completely out of left field, and totally against my usual character, I asked myself this question: do you really have to go back? I pondered this for a few minutes before I broached it with the group. They were all receptive to the idea, thrilled as a matter of fact. But it was one girl in particular, our mutual German friend, who really solidified the idea in my mind. She turned to me and, quite matter-of-factly, as some Germans have the glorious habit of doing, said, would you rather go home to your crappy job, or stay and spend time with your girl? Well, you can pretty guess my decision. I ended up quitting my crappy job so that I could backpack across Europe for 6 weeks. Years later I married that girl and emigrated to the US to start a new life here with her. Life is good. Kinda sucks. Ended up settling down in a foreign country and I miss my family back home. I didn't do it as abruptly as you described. I quit a job and took a course in teaching English in Barcelona. Then got a job teaching English, and did it for a few years in 2 countries. It was fun but got old after a while, so I went home. At first going home was difficult. Because while everyone will say something like wow what a great experience, it doesn't actually mean much for employers, and the certifications aren't really good for much. I ended up working 2 jobs, a few hours at each, until one started giving me more responsibility. I did it and I'm in Vietnam at the moment. Quit my job. I rent out my apartment. Don't regret a second of it. It has its downsides of course, but the perspective you get on life around the planet is worth everything. I warmly recommended Cambodia. Interesting country, friendly people and a horrible history. Go for it. Life's short. Ran out of cash. Stuck in Syria. PLS send help. Currently doing this. Been in Vietnam 3 months and head to Laos tomorrow. Quit my job a few years ago in the UK, in a crap call center, and went traveling but had a closed mind about it. Traveled for 9 months, then came home and regretted it after a week, but figured I'd got the traveling out of my system and now I can focus on finding a career. This was back in 2014. Fast forward to June 2016 and I'm looking at flights around the world from my hometown in Manchester. Saw a cheap flight to Vietnam and instantly thought frick JT and booked it. I had around 6 months to sell as much of my crap as I could and save as much as I could and then head off traveling. My job at the time was pretty dull, was in another call center but was making footsteps into working my way up in the business. Only thing I didn't manage to sell was my car, which is sat on my parents' driveway back home. Every time I feel homesick I remember the regret of coming home too early. This time round I wanna travel as long as I can. I have a decent amount of funds before I need to work. Been in Vietnam 3 months and head to Laos tomorrow as I said, then Cambodia and Thailand. Then I'm planning on coming back to Vietnam to find some work and then eventually on to New Zealand to work over there too. The first time I traveled with a friend. This time I'm doing it solo and it's the best decision I've ever made. This sounds like something I would really like to try for myself. My only concern is that I won't be as lucky and won't manage to get enough money to start my journey. Oh pick me. I graduated college and got a real job for 18 months and then said frick it and went to travel the world. It was a blast, I love it. I went all the way around the world and ended up in Australia. A company gave me a long stay visa and I would have been making good money, but for a lot of reasons I wanted to come back. I had a couple friends working at a small company and I got a nice raise from when I left. It's been very easy getting back into my old life. I have a nice apartment and everything is stable again. This trip cost me $30,000 but 7-8k was getting my life back together in Denver. The biggest takeaway I had from my trip around the world is that it's easy to think the next place or trip will make you happy, but it won't. You have to be happy with yourself. There is no car or bag or destination that can do that. It's an interesting thing to realize. Lots of people travel for lots of different reasons and by default it has an element of escapism in it. But traveling won't solve your problems, and often looking for the answer won't help if you don't know the question. I still travel a lot. I was in Italy and Amsterdam in November, Mexico in January, Aspen next weekend, then Nick in April. But I do it differently. I will definitely take another round the world trip, probably at 30. Only one job interviewer had any sort of issue with my trip and that guy was a dong. I'm living on the other side of the world 5 years later. I cashed out stock options, quit my job at 24 and drove across country to live in California. I was off the grid for 2 months during my road trip, camping across America and smoking a lot of weed and having a lot of physical relationships. 2 years later, I am right now on my way back from California, unemployed, prideless, and penniless. While I'm pretty depressed and don't know how to start living my life back together, I'm glad I did it. I know where my breaking point is. I know what's important to me. I know that the world is a lot bigger than you think and life is a lot longer than you realized. Every day is an opportunity to start fresh, and rock bottom comes with the security of a stable foundation. Not quite as extreme, but I'm doing it in June. Been bored at work for a while, no direction. Fear of what I'd do if I quit. Fear of what my boss would do if he knew I was looking for other work. Planning to travel is a catch-all. Exciting. Gives me a reason to leave work, a reason to save, a reason to finally start minimizing my possessions. I'd rather suffer a few more months so I can't hit the ground running. I sold my company, my house, everything I owned and moved to Australia. Spent 2 months chilling out, then got a job, moved house twice, changed city, now settled in Brisbane. The sea change, the freedom from what had become a stale working and social environment, was wonderful. Definitely recommend that. A change is as good as a rest. I traveled the world for 6 months after undergrad. So didn't go last minute, but it was inspired by the fact that I was finishing my degree mid-year and I had a dream where I then threw my grad school applications in the mail and traveled the world for 6 months. Woke up incredibly jealous of my dream self and then realized there was no reason not to do it. Basically, I'd saved enough money throughout undergrad to buy a car, which was more than enough if I stuck to cheaper countries. Still don't have a car, BTW, but don't regret that decision for a moment. Frankly, it was an incredible experience I will always treasure, and the hardest part was dealing with my parents nervous for their daughter traveling through Laos and South Africa and such places on her own. Of course, in solo travel you are very rarely alone, you meet tons of people. Did sprain my ankle in Laos in a zip lining accident, so wasn't walking well for about a week. But small price to pay in 6 months of adventures. I now live abroad, and my boyfriend and I are now saving money in hopes of doing a big trip together next year. There's so much world to see we likely won't hit up many of the destinations I've been to. Not the world but Canada. Quit my programming job due to having an butthole boss. My GF, now wife, was between jobs, so we just took off for a few weeks to Canada. Got new jobs after we got back. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.